I was talking to someone recently, and she was like, "Well, you've been so strategic in doing these partnerships, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "No, I have to push back on that. I've never been strategic in my life. I have not a strategic bone in my body. That feels like a tremendous boon because the pleasure's all mine."
Welcome, friends. I'm Kristen Marting, and this is Torches. Today, we have my dear friend and longtime poker buddy, Susan Bernfield. Susan is a playwright and artistic director and producer of the award-winning New Georges. I'm very excited to speak with her today. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, how'd you come to be in downtown performance?
Woo! I did not intend or ever dream of being in downtown performance. I was not cool. I was very, very uncool. I was always in theater growing up. I was a musical theater performer. I did kind of have an aesthetic interest in plays that were not necessarily naturalistic plays, somehow, as I recall. But mainly, I was a very terrible actor because I was very self-conscious about acting, and I was very shy. I was always very shy growing up. I was really a sort of typical theater kid who's very shy, but, audience. It's great. I can talk to lots of people. I could not talk to one person. So that was kind of me. And when after I went to drama school at Circle in the Square, after college I had a job, and then I was like, I have to do this. So I went to drama school there. And afterwards, with a couple of friends, we decided to found a theater company, and we didn't have any idea what that would be, and it felt very traditional or know what that was. We did 3 shows. One was The Misanthrope, one was something we sort of put together, and then we did a 3rd show, which was this Bruckner play, so that was kind of weird. Yeah.
What do you mean? When you put together, you made a devised piece?
We did make a devised piece, which was about fairy tale poetry. The reason we did it was so that we could pay ourselves and get our EMC cards, because you had to be paid to get your EMC card. And then I went to all kinds of auditions. I'd get up at 6 a.m. and go and try to be an actor. But I was so shy, so I could never have gone out and asked for an audition, and it was actually, I felt like it was easier for me to produce an entire play than to go out and pound the pavement. I was not a pavement pounder. So that theater company kind of went away, and I didn't know what to do with it. For some reason, we had actually got a 501c3 even for our 1 season because, we didn't know there was fiscal sponsorship. I didn't know anything about anything. And then it was the fall of 1991, and WAC was happening, Women's Action Coalition, and we were just doing clinic defense all the time, and the Anita Hill thing happened. And I was in a commercial class because someone had told me I should be in a commercial class with all these other actors. But my commercial class, for some reason, was all women. And they were having this really interesting conversation. I didn't go on auditions. I didn't have an agent. But they went on auditions, and they were really bitching and moaning about how they would go. And we were too young to be a young mom, but they were kind of too old to be a bimbo. And that there were just not a lot of choices. Surprise. But this conversation was so interesting that I talked to a few people in the class and was like, I have this theater company. Do you want to maybe be part of it? And we can make it something about women. And they were like, sure, invite us to the meetings. And I was like, there's no meeting, there's just me and a bank account. So we decided to do this and called it New Georges. And the first show we did was a Carol Churchill show, Vinegar Tom. And for some reason, because he thought it was the New York City premiere, Mel Gussow came to see it. He really loved it. And then I was like, damn, I have this New York Times review and don't know if we're going to keep doing this, and no infrastructure and no idea what I'm doing. But I went to Art New York, and they kind of gave me a little guidance, like, what is a board? And then I after Vinegar Tom, we couldn't find any more plays to be in, essentially. And so I thought, well, there must be women who write plays who are in my generation or, have the same concerns as me, and maybe I should find them and we should do their plays. And the ones I liked were kind of weirder plays. The first thing we did was a group of 1-acts, and then people started sending me plays. And gradually I feel like both I was figuring out by doing a little bit what I was doing in terms of being a producer, first of all. And we produced for the first 2 years on Theater Row. really at the Beckett. We basically were in a consortium working at the Beckett, and I produced 3 shows a year. I don't know how I did this. 3 shows a year for 2 years. And they were some pretty weird plays. We did the autobiography of Aiken Fiction by Kate Moira Ryan, which was nuts, and this other play about women in Ireland doing birth by Honor Malloy and Brona Murphy, Maiden Voyages. And I was sort of figuring out, A, what new plays were, and B, which kinds I liked, and which I wanted to be in conversation with. And at the end of the 2 years, when I don't know how I was standing up, I gathered a bunch of the artists who I'd met, because more people started coming around, and said, well, what do you really need? And they said, well, we need space in which to stand up and do things. And so with our first Art New York grant, our $2,000, I rented space in New York City on 20th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. I thought I could rent a space. And that was the room. What theater was that? The first room.
That was the first room.
I'm sure you were there.
So that was the New George's
room. The New George's room, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I rented the space, took out a lease. Somehow I thought I could do that. And then when that happened, it started to feel obviously more downtowny, because we were just making things and throwing things at the wall, and anyone could come in and do anything. And I also had learned that since I didn't know what I was doing, I should just ask artists what they need, and then that's what we'll do. And so after about not even, I think, a year of that, though, it seemed like, well, we're not going to produce for a really long time because we have a space in which to make things and figure out what to produce. I didn't know anything about play development. I was not in any structure or any conversation where it's so, when I meet with young people, they're like, well, tell me how you got started. And I say, it's irrelevant because there was no internet and there was no information. I didn't meet a living playwright till I was 27. I hadn't read Forness. I hadn't read any of the, things that theoretically should be underpinnings of what I do and did. I just kind of picked it up by being with, amazing people who were able to teach me and were doing much cooler things than me. And then we were in residence at Soho Rep, and then it really felt very downtown. And we were alternating there with Obie Theatre Company as resident companies, and seeing what they were doing and being in that interaction, I think, was very helpful. And then at one point, someone told me, I've told you the story before, someone told me that I should go to the Ohio Theater and I should see something called the American Living Room here.
Yes. Well, originally, American Living Room, when it was at the Ohio, was still Tiny Mythic. Was Tiny Mythic, my original theater company.
Right. So I went down to Soho, and I was by myself, and I was really nervous and anxious because I had heard of this thing, and maybe you'd have to sit on a sofa, and people had told me to go. And there was this huge line, and I thought it must be for something else. It couldn't have been for theater. It was across the street on Worcester Street, and on the Morgan Le Fay side. And then I went, and I sat in a real chair. I didn't sit on a sofa, but I was just so amazed by what I was seeing. First of all, the space, obviously, but then just the freedom. One of the pieces was a dance piece of what was happening, and it just felt like this is the place that I need to be. And the RAT conference happened in 97, and somehow I was invited to that. Maybe Catherine Porter, who I knew from our New York meetings from very early on, said you should come to this thing, and I was just really scared and was in conversation.
Let's just explain what the RAT conference is for folks. Yes. So RAT conference is an abbreviation for room and transportation, and it was a concept that Eric N. put into place. Yeah. For theaters to think about their work traveling and to think about serving different communities and to do it all on grassroots and not with resources. So, and it was a convening in New York City. They had RAT conferences in different cities, but this was the first New York City convening. And we did it primarily at the Ohio.
But there were other places too.
Yeah, but we were all organizers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you were, but I was just a fly on the wall. But also I remember being at a table, and the barn doors were open at the Ohio, and this conversation was happening around me about what things were in theater, and it just felt like, and I thought, I'm in the middle of the universe. I thought, I'm here in a way that I hadn't before, and and then I just kept producing and meeting artists and having artists come around, and really and I think that there were certain spots in figuring out the aesthetic and going back and forth with an aesthetic that felt more downtown. And I think that in turn brought people to us who, were making work that would be and want to be making things that would be things that would interest us. And I think producing Lisa D'Amour's Annabella Ema, directed by Katie Pearl, was a huge step in asserting what that aesthetic was. That was in 2003, which we did it here. And kind of going from there. And again, just following people. I feel like every program that we have is because artists said, now we need this. And I think that evolving and that evolution of figuring out both service and locale. I mean, I love being an itinerant theater because picking a theater is a design decision, and you can kind of make downtown wherever you end up working. Though some places did it better. It has always been a really exciting thing, and the room has been consistent, for 31 years now. That has existed as a thing. It moved to Art New York spaces at 520 to Midtown.
Yes.
In 2002, but it's still, I think, having our primary space be a workshop space, rehearsal space, a place where you can just get up and make things, is important and feels like really what we're about.
Yeah. You just talked a little bit about the aesthetic. When did the exuberantly theatrical start to be in the center of your mission, and you understanding that was the aesthetic that interested you?
I think that there have been some backs and forths just based on relationships with artists and things we wanted to produce based on what those relationships were, and wanting to explode things more into, again, like really early, we did some pretty crazy plays. We did a big variety of things. I don't know, it's sort of always been a taste thing early on. I feel like almost everything that we've done has been about looking back and saying, oh, this is what we do. It's never been, this is what I want. I feel like I don't consider myself visionless, but it has never been a projected vision. As you can tell by that story, it really feels like the theater company was a happy accident, and
responsive,
consistently responsive to what was happening, what people were talking about, and the ways people wanted to experiment. And similarly, it's always been about relationship with artists more than a play. I don't read a play and say let's produce it. It's really never happened. In some instances, maybe. I mean, I have to have some sort of relationship with the artist, and in around 2008 or so, I look back and I was like, well, what distinguishes the most successful productions we've had? And consistently, it's been playwright-director collaboration. And, to do a weird play, you can't just be like, let's find a director. It really is about finding those collaborations that are either already going or are nascent and seems like the vision is the same, and then taking a really long time to develop the play through to production, so that by the time you're in production, the collaborators, including, designers and whoever comes along the way, really are really steeped in the vision, know what it is. It's a cohesive vision, and the production will be cohesive based on what that is. So I think there also was a lot of learning about how to produce a weird play and what that requires, and certainly the collaborative element has always been, a thing like that. There was a really big moment, I think, when I about my understanding what interests me in a project rather than a play, because I don't feel like we produce plays, like you, it's a project. When I was I had known Sheila Callahan for a really long time. I was invited by John Eisner at the Lark to come up and meet with him and Daniela Topol, who I also knew and was a collaborator of mine already, about this play, Dead City, that John, I think, was really trying to find a home for. And I read the play and I was like, okay, yeah, I know Sheila, blah, 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 play. But then I got in the room with them, and they were describing the 2-year process they wanted to take to make the play, and how it's an adaptation of Ulysses. It takes place in New York City, and how things would need to swirl around, and we'd have to be in a place where we could be with the set for a really long time, and this just really dynamic idea. And they were just popping these ideas back and forth. And I was like, well, we just have to do this. I mean, this is why you should do a play, because the playwright and the director are popping, and I want to be in that conversation. And I really, since that project, really have considered myself to be third leg on the stool or whatever of all the collaborations that I work with, where I'm really, really hopefully inside helping to facilitate whatever's going on to push the play forward dramaturgically, especially in terms of production dramaturgy. And because we're in relationship already, that's always seemed like a pretty easy thing to do. And
right, like to be a true creative producer.
To be a true creative producer.
Right.
Throughout, all of those things. And that was a really, I think, transformative experience doing that play, which was, it was great. It went great. Somehow I heard about Kevin Cunningham. He was starting 3LD. It was the first show to open at 3LD because it needed the video. It needed all those things. That just came at the right time because we waited for it. We went on a hard hat tour of the space in the freezing cold. I mean, it really felt like this thing was happening. Yeah. So I think that particular combustion is what really interests me most, and that's what's going to get you something that does feel exuberant, because the exuberant, like one person, it's hard to foment exuberance, but several people, it's a lot easier to do that, and then hopefully I'm one of those people, and I'm exuberant along with you.
And you take a lot of risk. I mean, you're always doing new projects that don't exist, that don't have conventional forms. So how do you embrace risk and failure as an artistic director?
I never think about it. Never think about it. Things are failures. I also feel like we can, like by now at least, hopefully most things I can get to a place where it doesn't feel like an absolute failure. I don't think about it. I feel like I have real trust in the artists, and again, because we're in it together, I feel like we get there. We tend to get there most of the time. And at least for some people, or at least for me, or at least for the artist to get something out of it that brings them to the next step, or where they learn something about what happens. And occasionally there are issues, and occasionally there's a collaboration that we thought was really working that doesn't work, but it doesn't seem to happen that often. I think that the risk.
How do you know a collaboration isn't working, and how do you deal with that when that happens?
Well, it's only happened in the last 20 years, really, in one instance, and it just became clear that the objectives were separate, and the conversation wasn't gelling. The conversation around the play had gelled, but once we were in casting, once we were in design, once we were in those other things, the objectives were different. And I think that, this is projecting a little bit, but my sense was that the objective of one of the people was about getting the next thing, like this was my big chance, versus making the work. And that's very unusual, I think, for with the artists that we work with. I think we have to be present. We have to be present in the now and in the room, and I usually have a very good sense of that. Even when I meet artists for the first time, I feel like, I kind of can tell if, like, are you looking at me as a collaborator or a stepping stone? Feels like something I have a radar for pretty early on. And it's not that I don't want to be a stepping stone or a launch pad or any of those things. It's that that's not how you're going to get there. You're only going to get there by making the work, by taking the support that's there, by understanding what it is, and by being in the moment of making that piece and not making an impression, or not being controlling of that, or any of those things. And that's one of the reasons I think that I only produce people who I've been in a relationship with for quite some time, who I feel like, because you have to also understand what I do. I have to understand very deeply what you do. I mean, it's very vulnerable, as you know, as we all know, to be putting new work out there. Yeah. Something that does feel like you could have an artistic director who was thinking it could be a failure or felt risky. And I think the risk is really in not supporting. I think people who are supported are going to make their best work, and and I feel like I can help that happen. And I don't know. I think that's why I don't think about it, because I'm just very busy being hopefully present for people. Right. Now that we're doing so many more partnerships and things like that, we're very rarely the prime mover sometimes. I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of back and forth. I think that, it appears like that partnership is about money, and in some ways it is, but really, I'm showing up. I just want to be there. I realized pretty early on that my job is, I see the playwright, they're sitting in tech, they're sitting on the risers or whatever that might not even have chairs on them. I just go and sit next to them. You just need to have that person there. And then if you need to talk about something or ask a question or ask about a note or ask any of those things, you can do it. Yeah. But really it's just presence. It's just knowing that, I'm not home with my kids. I'm with you. Yeah. Because you're doing your play, and it's really hard. It's really, really, really hard to birth a new play. So
it is. And how do you?
And that's fun for me. Also, I get so much from that. Yeah.
How do you balance making your own work with running an organization? That's always the tricky thing to do.
Yeah. It's cyclical, and I think I realized very, very early on that it's cyclical. All my early plays have beaches in them because I was only writing on vacation. And realizing that writing practice was maybe not what I would have, but that if I was inspired, I could definitely make it happen or write. I don't know. I mean, it because I didn't start as a playwright, because I only got to know what new play development or writing or playwriting was after I already had the theater company. I feel like the equivalent, I don't know. I think that if you're an artist and then you end up starting a theater company and it feels like that starts to take over, then, I mean, I wasn't an actor, but I was a bad actor. I'm not saying about bad acting, but I'm much better now because I'm freer and looser. Then I think that
I've seen your solo. You've done a couple of solo shows now.
Yes,
which have been really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Singing, talking.
I like to sing. I like to talk. It's nice when I get to do it. It's true. I don't think I have felt like a big resentment around it or an inability to do it. And when I felt like it really is coming to me and I need to do it, then I have done it. I feel like since the pandemic, it's been a little bit harder. I do have a project I'm working on that's a little slow because it's a musical also, and collaborators are also busy. And I've been so busy. We've actually been really busy since the pandemic. Right before the pandemic, I don't know if you know, Madeline George and Ann Washburn had this Writers' Army thing where they would take over a space with all these little tables and you could go and write, and it was silent writing for a certain amount of time. And that was life-changing for me because I would get the email and I would think, well, I could do this because it's discreet and someone else has planned it.
Yes.
It's harder, of course, for me to plan it. So that, I wrote several plays because that was happening. And I had a Sloan commission that I wrote during that time because I was trapped in a room with people, which was very useful. Now it seems a little less different. But I also think that I'm, I still was in kind of, I've produced my own solo pieces and I produced my own play through the Pool pop-up theater company that has different iterations, and there's one coming up now. And that was great. I think that writing plays and sending them out into the world, first of all, I don't think it's the model anymore, so I don't think anyone should do it. But the project I'm making now, I hope will be something that I know that I can make happen. It's too distressing to write things, to be a playwright, and write things that you can't make happen.
I want to duck in quickly on what you just said.
Yeah.
So how do you think that a playwright should put their work out there? You said they should not send it out.
They should start by producing themselves and making their own work and being in communities where people are seeing what they're doing. I think that we're in a really I feel like there's almost the bubbling up that's happening now almost feels like a new downtown to me. And I was just talking about this morning. I feel like I've become this mouthpiece for this thing. When we were coming up, people, were producing theater, and the theaters that have come up in the last 10, 15 years or so are presenting theaters. So there has been more artists producing themselves or independently, with a new producer class that is rising to really be producers and line producers for independently producing artists. And it's a different ecosystem, and there are different things going on. And at New George's, we have two programs where we support our artists who are producing their work independently in two different kinds of ways. One in collaboration with New George's. You saw the play Everything Is Here, and that was in collaboration with New George's.
Peggy Stafford
play, directed by Megan Finn, bumps up from the original program we had, which we still have, which is called New Georgia supported production. We started getting phone calls like, please, can I come in and you just tell me how to produce? And we started getting so many of those phone calls, we thought that should be a program. So we created this mentorship program called New Georgia Supported Production, and many productions have taken advantage of that. And then there's a little imprimatur in this mentorship. We coach you through fundraising. We have fiscal sponsorship. And then in collaboration with New Georgia's, kind of ups that a little bit. We have a grant that goes to the artists because they're producing on Showcase. It's an artist grant that they can use for the production in whatever way they want. Mm-hmm. It's now funded by Adventurous Theater Fund, which is amazing. And so we're part of these. I mean, coming up and doing all these shows that feel, the risk is less because it does feel small, and they're super cool things that shouldn't have a very expensive production, and we have to be on contract now, but we can support artists who are doing what we did back 30 years ago, which is make these crazy shows. And there are a lot of ways to facilitate those shows now. I mean, think of what's gone through the tank, and think of how it's being seen and recognized. Mm-hmm. And you have the critics there, and people want to know what's going on, and it feels very forward and front-footed in a way that a lot of other big theaters, certainly, we always complain about that, but other contexts, even our contexts, are just feel kind of more cemented to the ground. So I think that there's a lot of activity out there, and people are really making stuff. And also this generation, everyone's hybrid. No one's going to just be like, I'm a playwright. I very rarely meet people. Yes. I'm a director. Everyone's a producer. Sometimes people are a director and a sound designer, or a generative set designer, or, it's just incredible. We have a program, The Jam, and it was a playwright director group because it was about forging that kind of collaboration. And it was not my idea. Again, it was the idea of artists, 3 artists who came to me. And now it's everybody. There are people in it who are doing all kinds of generative things, several designers, producers, etc. And I love that as a way to move forward.
You were just talking about institutions.
Yes.
So if there was one thing you could change about the way the institutions operate, what would that be? What would you recommend?
About like larger institutions or any institutions?
Yeah. The field's kind of in free fall. So
the field is kind of in free fall.
And there's some stuff that we're doing downtown that I think people could learn from.
It's true. It's true. I do go back to that listening thing. I don't know what people do. Like people ask me about the way, I don't know how institutions operate. And there are all these structural things, which I don't understand because I'm so anti-structural. Flexibility is really a core value of ours. Being nimble, I think, has saved us through all these. I mean, think about, recessions and 9/11, when we sort of have this in our grant language about all the different things, we've been through at this time. And, we just adapt and change. And I don't know what the things are that feel potentially less adaptable in terms of these structures. I don't know what in an institution a board expectation is, and how they're not going to understand the way we now want to do this might operate. I don't know, but I think that there are additional responsibilities also that they have that I don't have to worry about, which is a great thing in my life that I've kept, by keeping small. But I do feel like there may be ways that the artist can come and create systems or ways of having processes that feel more open and will be more satisfying on both sides. I mean, there are other things that get in the way of processes, I think. I mean, the 29-hour reading structure where you can't hold a prop feels to me that is anti-theatrical, that you're not making theater. And to me, because of what I do, reading a play is not making theater, and it's not learning what's theatrical about your play. I don't think, I've had plenty of readings, and sometimes they are, and often they're helpful, but how are you going to learn what your play is in space? And and spatial relationship seems to me to be about what theater is about, and without that, and with depriving, frankly, actors of that part of their toolkit of being able to be in space with other people, I don't know how that's playmaking. And playmaking is not the purpose, I think, of new play development often. The purpose is script whatevering. And scripts should be better. I mean, there are ways to make scripts better, but then at some point I don't understand something that is not on its feet. I really want to make this t-shirt. We were going to do it. We were going to do it, and we somehow didn't do it. That has like the music stand and the international no stop sign on it. Because you have to move.
The Mercury store does development, but focused with directors bringing projects in, and they have no music stands in the place because they don't want people to be standing at music stands. They don't want that limitation for people to be working with that. I just loved that they didn't have music stands.
And finding workarounds for that, and finding, and I think that that's a divide. I think that that rule following, not that we don't, whatever, but and other things that are, what is like being in a devised process, what is having to make something that feels really like it can only happen in a theater versus play, which also has to do with playwright-director collaboration and making sure that the collaborators are in the room very early and feeling like they're doing something together. Even as a playwright, I feel like there are moments when the play has to have some serious focus, but then let's figure out what this thing is that's going to hopefully eventually live on its feet. So that's where I sort of come into and that isn't a thing with like big theater, small. That's because there are structures, and those structures exist for reasons. So where can you go if you're putting on a small production or you're just getting friends together to do? Where can you go where you can really feel like you're making?
You've talked a lot about the way that you listening to artists. How do you think we should be listening to artists right now in this current context of what's going on in the U.S., what's going on politically, what's going on socially, what's happening economically, both to humans in our world, but also to our field? Yeah. How do you think we can listen to artists better at this time?
Wow. I think that first of all, we speak a lot, and the way the ecosystem again has turned into a presenting ecosystem. I feel like there's an irony there that there's so much rich work happening that way at the same time as, especially now, we're talking about accessibility and transparency around budgets and things like that. And if you're self-producing or independently producing, you really need to be coming up with some dough, and that is a challenge for many people. So I think that it's a challenge, and it's scary, and it's difficult, and and so that creates a what is it, I think, kind of dichotomy or thing that's troubling. I think that's difficult. I think that I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm in a lot of these conversations about, and the thing about the artists and the ones who are really have to do it in a way that comes through, is that they're asking really good questions around how they're going to do it, and they're so open to new ways of doing those things, and especially collaborative ways and doing it with other people. I feel like I'm not in a lot of conversations where people are pitting each other against each other, or sort of this traditional dog-eat-dog way of doing anything, which I think does come from, where we were as well with, with kind of the downtown thing, and everyone running the other theater companies is also our friend, and all the things, because we are in a certain kind of trench together. It always sort of felt that way. Like, if there are 20 people in the world who are doing this nutty thing that we are doing, I need to be with them in that trench. And I think I feel that with the thousands of intersecting communities among artists as well. And so I'm watching, I think, what happens with that, and also who's intersecting or interacting with who, and how people are finding communities. And then when they're in that community, if they're coming to me to ask questions or say something that they've observed there, then I feel like I have the resources to understand contextually where they are in their process of either making a play or being an artist or being in New York City, and how they can use their own community as a resource as well as the one that we've been putting together for them.
Yeah. In the 90s, there were a bunch of theaters that bubbled up, and that's not happening so much right now. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because people are not institutionalizing when they're making their own work.
Is that better?
It might be, because institutionalizing, you need more money. But I don't think it's stopping them from making the work, and that's
Right.
what I think is really interesting.
And you've said you think that the downtown scene is very vibrant right now, but the downtown scene is no longer geographic.
No, it's not geographical.
It's all over.
Yes, I know.
All 5 boroughs and
Downtown
going
is
to
fancy
every...
pants. You can't go make anything there.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that there is this clarity around it's an ethos. That downtown is that kind of thing, and I still use that term because I love that term.
How do you define that ethos?
I think it's independent in some way, even if it's venue driven, and there, even though all the aesthetics vary to some degree, I think that there's a non-linear / brave / no sofa / whatever you want to call it kind of aesthetic that feels consistent, a language-based kind of thing. I think that the language plays, especially that emerged in the aughts, are still extremely influential in terms of the writers who are working downtown. And I mean, the amount of times 13P gets talked about, both structurally and like in any sort of situation I think you're in. I was on a panel last week, and Washburn was on it, talking about that, but everyone, I think, gravitates toward that, and I don't think it's only the structure. I think it's also those playwrights and the way that they operated with language, and that continues to be influential, even as some of them are working in
more established
theaters,
right?
And more established theaters. So I think that there's a playing around with that kind of thing. I think there's an element of surprise in it. I know that my mandate for myself is I want to do something I've never seen before. It doesn't always happen, but I try to make that happen. And then it's a community, because I think that still, while again, more established theaters are making more work that I'd consider adventurous or that has come out of downtown, I still don't know how consistent it is, and I'm not sure. It's hard for me to know how much it travels outside of New York City. A lot of that I think has to do with also contextualization, which I don't think happens, which I think helps a lot, and we talked about a lot also in the aughts. Was that answer your question at all?
It does, but also you just touched on something that I think is interesting. We have seen in the last 10 years a lot more of downtown uptown. Uptown institutions, Broadway, off-Broadway, commercial productions, touring. What are you seeing? Is everyone else becoming riskier? Are those artists taking less risks when they go up there? What do you think is happening? Both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think what's interesting to me, as someone who never, very, very rarely produces the same artist twice, but who feels that there is some consistency in the work, that what's interesting to me is that you can have that at a seasonal institution, you're going to have those people and that weirdness and that whatever that slot is, but there's going to be this variety. So hopefully or there, I don't know, hopefully, but there's some sort of teaching of audience, and then the next one you might find different, and so that's interesting to me, because I don't do season planning. I have curiosity around how did that play get programmed, and that's really great. And then the next thing, there will be a sofa, but I
or
have
a kitchen sink,
right? Yeah, I talk about the sofa, but yeah, the kitchen sink is the proverbial real thing. Anyway, but it is exciting. It's always exciting and heroic, I feel like. And I think those shows do well. So it surprises me, the return. But it also, I think that having more eclectic taste just feels weird to me. I clearly do not.
So community, you've talked about a lot. And I think when you talk about that, you're talking more about the artists that you work with. But I also think that you're attracting audiences that are beyond the community of artists that you work with. And how do you think about your relationship to your artist's work relationship to the audience, and New Georgia's relationship to the audience? How do you get new people to come in and see what you're making?
How do we? I mean, it's always been a little bit of a struggle. I think it really depends on the project, and it always feels sort of project-based. Except in the past few years, I feel like we have had some people who I think are following us around a little bit. But again, because we're not seasonal, and because everyone's things by something else, I think it's sort of up and down how much that is. I think when we had a lot of things in a row that seemed to hit it, that it felt like people were coming to the New Georgia show, and then it kind of felt like they weren't. It's hard to say, but I think that there are a lot of tools for getting buzz around what we've been doing in the last couple of years. I think that another byproduct of the independent producing is people coming up with scrappier ways to present their work, and we are still scrappy, and we've glommed onto that in a lot of ways. I think it being involved in the last couple of years as we have with so many projects because of supporting the independent producing, because of the partnerships we've done, I do feel a little uptick in people feeling aware and coming to things because of us. And I think the good work will out. And that's what I've always experienced, is that some shows you just can't sell, and it's not badness. It's just maybe confusion in the way we're putting it forth, or less of an obvious hook into it, or fewer people talking about it. But we've been really lucky, and our last few shows have really done very, very well. And they've been very intentional in that. They also have been co-productions with theaters that have an audience, and they've also been very specific in who their audience might be. Actually, the last 3 big co-productions we've done, I just feel it's so dependent on what that is, and that is how people choose what to go to.
Do you think your identity and your artist identity as women has an impact on the aesthetic that you make, or on how you reach audiences?
I feel like audiences and funders have never cared about that. I really think it's never been a selling point for us in terms of either audiences. I think at the beginning it was really it was a problem. It was a problem. I took women out of our press release, and we got more press than we ever had before in 2006. But now I think that the work, which is I always wanted, the work precedes us and precedes that part of the mission. So I don't really focus on it that often anymore in terms of marketing. But I think it is important in terms of the artist relationships and in terms of the way that we work. A few years ago, because every gender, everything, we've expanded, everything's expanded in beautiful and wonderful ways, but also complicated for if you have a mission like ours. And complicated in a way just like, how many words do we have to expand? So we started saying that we are a non-patriarchal space. And that has helped me in so many ways. Also because, I've met plenty of cis women who do not belong in a non-patriarchal space. It's just, we're here, we're in community, and we need to be in a conversation. And I don't want to be the power. That's not my interest. Because then I can't do what I need to do. We need to be with each other. In dialogue, working together. I might be cleaning the bathroom for your show. That's what we do. We're downtown hands-on producers. I mean, I'll do anything, and I'm just there to lug the beer. So so the non-patriarchal space has been very helpful, because I know very quickly, no matter how you're presenting or how you identify, if a non-patriarchal space is really, if I can serve you. That's my big question. I meet with so many artists every year, artists who don't get into our very competitive programs, and I just sit with them and think to myself, can I serve you? And then say, I can serve you. Let's be in conversation for the rest of our lives. That's what I do. And that's a pleasure for me. People still talk to me even though I'm old, which is a surprise. I thought, I'm going to get old and no one's going to want to talk to me anymore. And then I won't have a job. I'll have to fire myself.
Well, now you're also talking about gatekeeping and accessibility.
Yeah.
And, I think that's wonderful, to make yourself accessible to artists that you may not work with, but you're just offering advice. I had a policy when I was running here that I'd meet with anyone who asked to have a meeting. Yeah. And I think that's a responsibility as someone who's supporting artists' work.
And it's how I learn things.
Yeah.
About needs, as we were just talking about, and about what what people are working on, what they want to work on. We have a residency that's only for artists already affiliated, artists with whom we're in relationships, so that there can be a shortcut to the application process. And basically, and most of the application is a pitch. We did this yesterday and the day before. We had many applicants this year. It was really wonderful. And part of it is you might get in this program, but part of it is I want to know your dream project, because then I can support it in another way.
Yeah.
We have a program, and it's great to get in the program, but what do you really need, and how can we talk about
might
how
there
you
still
need
be
to
a
get
conversation?
Exactly, and how get to the next step, or is it about space, which is the one thing we have, or is it about, I can read the thing and we can talk, because I just want to be in those relationships, and any touch point we have makes those relationships stronger.
What do you hope to leave behind for the next generation of theater makers? Is there something?
Wow. I don't know. I don't think that far ahead.
Okay.
I hope that, we have a legacy of both the work that we've made and produced, and the artists that who have come through, who are continuing to make work that feels influential. In addition to, I hopefully this way of working, I feel really proud of, and staying open and just kind of trying to be there and be whatever support is necessary in the moment. I think it's interesting going through the years, not only being able to figure out things about what we really do and about what I do as well, recognizing, this is what I do, which seems to happen all the time. And then being able to then harness that in a different kind of way because of having that knowledge. This is who I need to be here in this moment. And I am that person and can be that person, especially as someone who didn't project any of this. And sort of being an example through our values and the way our values have come forth of one way to kind of get it done. I was talking to someone recently, and she was like, "Well, you've been so strategic in doing these partnerships, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "No, I have to push back on that. I've never been strategic in my life. I have not a strategic bone in my body. I am open." And then I guess nice. So people are like, "Come be part of my show at this theater company," and we're like, "Happy to. I want to be there for you." And that feels like
generosity.
A tremendous boon, because the pleasure's all mine.
That's beautiful.
That's what I get out of it. I mean, I want to be where it's happening.
What's a favorite moment of joy? Your favorite moment of joy in one of the pieces of art that you've produced or created?
My whole life.
Yeah. Pure joy.
Pure joy. There's a moment in God's Ear, the Jenny Schwartz play by Annie Kaufman, that we produced in 2007, and then the
gorgeous show.
And there's a moment in it. So the stage was kind of a box on top of the stage. It was at CSC at East 13th Street Theater, and then there were these holes that you didn't initially see in the box. That was the stage. It was raked. And people would pop out of the holes constantly. There was ones where cocktails popped out of the holes, all these things. But close to the end of the play, Christina Kirk, who plays the mother Mel, is standing, and there's been traveling. I can't remember exactly what happened, but suddenly one of the bigger holes, and there's snow happens. So there's snow in the hole. The bigger things, and then Gibson Fraser, who played Ted, just came up out of the hole like this, and with the snow sort of coming over her. And this is sort of their biggest moment of really facing who they are after all the things that have happened. Their child has died and they've lost language, and he just comes out of this hole like a dream. If I could go back and be in that moment, I just think about that moment all the time. It was so beautiful and perfect. And just thinking about that when in some shitty tech moment, whatever, I'm like, things work out. I was under that set. I taped all the things together to make sure everything was safe for my stage manager. I was putting foam up under that set. We came up with that set by we learned so much from this by putting like cardboard boxes in the room, and so everyone could pop out of the cardboard boxes. And after that, I always did production development, where we had like a staging workshop against the rules. Yeah, it was great.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for hanging out with
this.
me.
Yes, thank you.
In general.
Thank you for hanging out with me for these last 20, 30 years. Yeah. Okay. Thanks to HowlRound for hosting us, and we hope you'll come back and see more of Torches.